Hello everyone and welcome to tonight's Let's Talk Teenager session. It's so amazing to see so many parents and carers here with us tonight. So thank you so much for giving up an hour and a half of your evening to come along. We really hope that you find tonight's session helpful. My name is Chloe Pope from the Safety and Resilience Consultancy, and along with my colleague Emma Stevens, we'll be facilitating tonight's session. Our Safety and Resilience Consultancy is a partnership set up to support you with the challenges of looking after your children and young people in this ever-changing landscape. With this amount of people on the Teams platform, it can make the IT a little bit temperamental. So you'll see that your cameras are off and your mics are muted. This does mean that unfortunately Emma and I also cannot respond to any raised hands in tonight's session. But the chat bar is there and it's open, so please do put any comments or questions in. This is a really great way to support each other. So if you have used a service or have some tools that worked for you, please do share this information. However, we do of course all know that every family is different, so because something worked for someone else doesn't necessarily mean it will work for you. Also, we are very aware that services are very stretched and that you may not always have had the response or the support that you needed. However, please do try and keep things positive. We want this to be a safe and a caring space for you to support each other with signposting, any tips or strategies as much as you can. For us, sometimes it can be difficult to present tonight's session and give those appropriate answers. And that's because there may be a question that needs a little bit more thought rather than that quick public reply. If that is the case, please be assured that we won't be ignoring your question and we will respond via email to you. Please be respectful of each other and for confidentiality, please do not give any names or identifying features of children or young people. The session tonight will be recorded, but your names and comments in the chat bar will not be visible to anyone watching the recording back. And finally, our toolkit that accompanies these sessions will be shared with you if it hasn't already via email. We've run these sessions previously and have taken on board any feedback given and have changed them slightly to keep up to date with our ever-changing world. So if you have attended before, there may be new things to hear, or it may be that you've come along again as a reminder. If that is the case, it's great to have you back again. And one very last housekeeping comment, we really encourage you to share whatever you hear over the next few weeks with your young people, but a lot of the content you'll need to think about before you share. So tonight is not suitable for your teenagers to listen to, so please sit somewhere that they can't hear or pop some headphones in. Some of the content that we'll share tonight may be difficult for you to hear. We can't apologise for this, as it's important that you know what your children and young people are facing. But one positive of being at home and listening remotely on the sofa is that you can mute us, you can take a break, and when you return, we're likely to have moved on. This is a really great way of looking after yourselves. These sessions are not about telling you how to be the perfect parent. That person doesn't actually exist, but just to make you aware of some of the risks and issues that you may come up against. As professionals, Emma and I go on lots of training and lots of awareness events, but we're always very aware that the people who support children the most, you as parents and carers, are often not given this information. Being responsible for teenage humans is really hard work, and to do a good job of this, you need to look after yourselves too. And just a quick note, if you are watching this recording, just be aware that some of the videos may not play, but you should be emailed these. Links. Over to Emma.
Thank you, Chloe. Hi, everybody. I'm Emma, and I'm going to start our content tonight. So, as Chloe did say, some of tonight's information isn't very nice. Even if you don't feel that it's directly concerning your family and your teenagers right now, it can still be really difficult to listen to. So do look after yourselves. Tonight's agenda includes looking at those community risks. So we're going to be looking at things like county lines, gang crime and social media. We're also going to be looking then at safety planning and some further discussions around unhealthy relationships, in particular things like CSE and grooming. And then next week, we're going to look in more detail about how to keep your family safe and how to keep your family strong against some of these worries. So firstly, tonight, we want to look at what's happening in our community and how this impacts on your teenagers. Devon is a great place to live. And although I live nearby in South Devon, I'm constantly moaned at my teenagers for not living somewhere more exciting. And I'm sure that some of you get the same. Although some of our bigger cities are definitely becoming more diverse, many of our rural and coastal towns do seem to have a long way to go. People often think of Devon as being full of sleepy villages, full of retired people. But as you can see from this data slide, that's not the true picture. Nearly 90,000 10 to 19-year-olds live in Devon, and we also have the highest number of children's homes in England. But as we will see tonight, it is not only the families that services know about that we need to be aware of. Lots and lots of children in the UK are thought to be involved in criminal activity, but only a small percentage of those are already working with services. Across the UK, hospitals saw nearly 80,000 under 18s with stab wounds in a 2-year period. 80,000 young people going to hospital because they've been stabbed. County lines and similar issues can affect all of our young people. Please don't be drawn into a false sense of security that it's just those who already live in challenging situations and areas, or those with additional vulnerabilities. This really can and does affect all of our young people. We're going to see a news clip later tonight, which has a snippet of an interview from somebody called Junior Smart from the SOS Project, and he's clearly telling all parents that this is something that you need to be aware of. So you will probably have heard of the expression county lines, maybe from the news, from social media, or from safety campaigns. And your children will most certainly have had some information from their school. But as parents, you might not have had much detail shared with you. Yet, as we said at the beginning, you are the frontline security in protecting your teenagers. So I'm just going to quickly explain a little bit about what county lines is. So it's a form of criminal exploitation where criminal gangs persuade, coerce or force children and young people to either store items or transport them to suburban areas. So when we're talking about items, we're thinking about drugs, weapons or money. So county lines is an issue that can lead to serious physical and emotional harm to young people. We are seeing younger and younger children being approached to carry drugs and knives. And this is mainly because they are less likely to be stopped by the police and they're much easier to coerce and threaten. There are now sad cases of 5 and 6-year-olds in larger cities being targeted and recruited. And Devon usually follows the trends in bigger cities a few years later. The Children's Society website tells the harrowing story of a 9-year-old with thousands of pounds of drug debt and a threat on his life. And a couple of years ago in Plymouth, a teenager was jailed after he was bullied into carrying almost half a kilo of heroin and cocaine to pay off what started as a small cannabis debt. The young person was transporting £46,000 worth of drugs to Plymouth, and his mother's home in the city was broken into twice, and a threatening message against his family was left, which was his reason for doing this. His mother had already tried to pay off the gang by sending them £5,000, but they wanted more and more, and they forced the teenager into working for them. He had a phone with messages on showing that he was supplying these drugs and trying to source more in Bristol or Birmingham. It's worth mentioning here that nobody else in this story was caught other than the teenager. Nobody else was arrested or charged or sent to prison. And we're going to explore that a little bit further in a minute. So these types of gangs really like new recruits, so children with no previous criminal history. And they refer to these young people as clean skins. So young people with no prior police involvement, often from families like yours and mine, not involved with any agencies. For example, your teenager may be at a party and be offered something to smoke, maybe some weed, and they accept this and they smoke it, assuming that it's free. They then get asked to pay for it at a very overinflated price. Your teenager's got no money on them, but the friend that gave it to them wants paying now and threatens them if they can't pay. So they may be offered another way to pay off this debt, such as selling something to another friend. Lots of young people who get into trouble this way are too embarrassed to tell anyone and can't bring themselves to ask friends or parents for any support. They often feel that their parents have enough money worries and they don't want to ask for any more money than they need to. They often receive threats from these gangs, such as, "I know where your little sister goes to school," or "I know where you live." And this is the way that they can be coerced into carrying and delivering more things. Gang leaders are very clever at not enabling people to leave. It may be then that your young person agrees to do one job, dropping a packet to somebody, but then they get mugged on the way there, and then they owe that gang a large amount of money. That mugger is part of the gang, but your young person now possibly owes hundreds of pounds to the gang. And any teenager can get involved very quickly into something that they can't get out of. And as well as being used to transport drugs, county lines can also sexually abuse and exploit young children of any gender. And this can happen through children being groomed into what they believe is a romantic relationship with a gang member, which then leads to exploitation. And we're going to look at this in a little more detail during next week's session. So I'm not sure if any of you watch Hollyoaks, but soaps can be a great place to explore difficult situations. They're really good conversation starters. Hollyoaks tackled county lines really well a couple of years ago, and we've got a clip that clearly shows how any child can be coerced into it. It's only a few minutes long, but it does show how easy it is for children to be recruited. So we saw at least 3 main victims here. There was Juliet, Charlie, and Ella, and they'd all be on the bottom tier of this gang hierarchy model that you can see on your screens now. They're the ones who are taking all the risks, having all the stress, and effectively possibly changing their futures. The older male at the beginning talking to Ella is probably on the next level up, but he's also going to have enormous pressure on him from above. And on this higher tier, well, these are the people that are making the money, the people that we never see, the ones that the police really want to catch. Like the teenager in Plymouth that was jailed for transporting the drugs for the gang, he would have been on the bottom rung of this ladder, and the employees, his employers, seem untouchable much further up. And any teenagers transporting or storing drugs or money are going to be right down on this bottom rung. But we also need to understand the horrible realization that sometimes gangs are attractive and exciting to our young people. Think about movies such as The Fast and the Furious, or games that they play online on their Xbox, etc. Gangs are sometimes portrayed as glamorous and edgy, all things that are attractive to our young people. The St Giles Trust, and in particular the SOS Project, are an organisation who support vulnerable young people who are at risk of or who are escaping from exploitation. And many of their team of workers are people who have previously led the kind of life that we're talking about. And they've done some really good research about why people are sometimes drawn more to this way of life. And one of the biggest reasons outside of the sense of belonging was money. So mainly for boys, actually, it wasn't a major factor for most of the girls, and less girls felt that they needed to support their families more. But any quick search of Instagram or Snapchat will show you literally hundreds of images of young people covering themselves in cash. Money's really attractive to most people, and especially young people who might feel that peer pressure to have the latest trainers or the latest tickets to somewhere. There aren't many jobs that pay a decent wage for our children, and pressure on families right now means that very few families have limitless money to satisfy the needs of teenagers. And criminal activity can appear to pay very well. And this attraction to money then leads on to another common reason for getting involved in crime, which is respect. Again, if you've got the latest fashion or you've got a big car, young people feel that this gives them respect and credibility in their peer groups. It also offers them a perceived perception that there's a protection that they can buy to help themselves, and that they can buy themselves out of some situations. And next week, we're going to look more at image and grooming, because for both of our boys and girls, this protection was a major issue. And then finally, something to do was a top 5 reason for gang members wanting to join. There's nothing else to do. I was bored. We all know that our communities used to have more youth clubs and events, but a lot of those services have been cut, and it can feel sometimes like there is little to occupy our teenagers. We looked at that brain development last week and how we need to be constantly challenging our teenagers. And this week, the message is the same. Keep them busy. Get them into sports, watching or playing, watch a Netflix season together. Sign them up to everything and anything, because that sense of belonging is still what most people are seeking. And we're going to give out some local contacts for you in Devon at the end of next week. But please take any opportunity to open up conversations with your young person about gangs. Talk about movies that you've watched or point out any drug stories in the media, especially where things ended up way less than glamorous. These are great conversations to try and have over the weekly dinners that we were talking about last week. I'm going to play you a recording now of a young person that we have worked with who wanted to share her story with you all. This is Libby.
Hello, I'm Libby. I'm 15 and I live in foster care in Cornwall, but I used to live in South Devon with my mum and my little sister. My mum is trying to currently move house so that we can all live together again. There was this girl at my school called Abby who always had lots of nice new clothes and was really popular. No one ever messed with her. One day she asked me if I could help her out by dropping a package to a friend's house for her. She said she would pay me £10 and I did not want to say no, so I did it. It was a very small parcel and the flat I went to was quite scary, but she gave me £10 and asked if I would do some more the next day. I said I couldn't and she said that was okay. The next day at school, my best friends wouldn't even talk to me. When I asked them why, they said that they had heard that I was selling drugs and didn't want to be around me anymore. School was really horrid with no friends, and it seemed as if everyone was talking about me. I started skipping some classes and not wanting to go in. I couldn't really tell my mum because she was arguing with her boyfriend at the time. One afternoon, Abby asked me again if I wanted to deliver something for her. I had nothing else to do, so I said yes. I earned £30 in 2 nights, and I was good at it, so she asked me to go a bit further away. She gave me a rail card so I didn't have to buy train tickets, and a phone so that she could get a hold of me. I skipped school more and more as I had paid work to do, and Abby was my only friend. One day I had over £300 on me and I got mugged. I lost the money and all the little packages that I had. When I told Abby, she told me that it was okay, but that I now owed her over £600 and I would have to pay it off. She also said that she would have to charge me interest until it was paid. I had no way of paying back. I could not ask my mum, and so I had to work for Abby for free. Abby told me how to store the drugs inside my body so that I wouldn't get mugged again. Abby gave me more and more work to do, and because I wasn't getting any money, I had to answer the phone whenever she called me. She threatened to stab my little sister if I didn't keep working for her, so I had no choice. She told me that I could pay the money back faster in other ways by being nice to some of her male friends. I didn't want to do it, but I needed a way out. They got me very drunk and recorded some of the things they made me do. Abby threatened to post the video online for all my friends to see if I stopped working for her. My mum was getting really cross with me. I was never home, and when I was home, I was tired and irritable. She kept getting hassle from school as I was never there. I didn't have anyone to tell as it was my own fault for starting it and for all the things I had done. When a social worker got involved, my mum was really cross with me, and I had to move out so that I wasn't a bad influence on my little sister. Abby and her friends used to hang around outside my house, ringing the bell and running away to try and find out where I was. My little sister was only 11, but they tried to talk her into going out with them. When I moved area and had a social worker, Abby tried to contact me, but it was harder for me to go anywhere, so she finally left me alone. I eventually told my foster carer what had been happening, and she believed me, but I was too scared to tell anyone else. The foster carer talked to my mum to help her understand, and now hopefully, when my mum has moved, I can go back there and live. I keep thinking what I could have done to stop it sooner, but I was so scared.
So we are listening to some tough stories tonight. And as parents, you are unable to protect your children from everything. Remember, there's no magic wands. But from working with parents whose children have been involved in gangs and exploitation, there are some common signs that you can look out for that might suggest your son or daughter are involved in something that you would prefer them not to be. You know what their usual behaviour is, and you'll be able to spot any significant changes. Chloe's going to talk to you in a minute, and both of us again later during future sessions, about how to have some of these difficult and awkward conversations and what to do about safety planning. But for now, I just want to point out a few warning signs for you. Lots of these are normal teenage behaviours, and it's only if they are very dissimilar or against what you would normally expect to see from your teenager that you will need to explore more. So it's a really good reason, isn't it, to get involved in your teenagers' lives. You need to know what is normal behaviour for them. So some of the things to look out for. Firstly, an increase in money. So do they suddenly have lots of new clothes, shoes or makeup? Are they bringing home takeaway food? Do they have lots of new piercings, tattoos? Are they buying gifts for people? Are there lots of Amazon deliveries turning up on your doorstep? Do they have just more available cash? If there's no new job and you're not funding all of this, where's the money coming from? So families where both parents don't live together can make this harder to spot, as teenagers will happily say how much the other parent is giving them. But maybe you're finding hotel key cards, unexplained keys. Hotels are really good places for drug drops. I quite say that, drug drops, as they aren't always manned anymore. You don't have to walk past a reception. You can obviously sometimes just check yourselves in with a card. So things can easily be left in hotels to be picked up. There's no face-to-face contact needed. So there's a bit of privacy for storing things. Additional phones are a huge telltale sign. A new phone, which they cannot explain or they give a poor explanation for. If they won't let the phone out of their sight, they answer it immediately and secretively. And some of this is not unusual. We know that most teenagers are literally glued to their phones. Their whole lives are in their phones. But again, you're looking for something unusual. Are they suddenly reacting differently when their phone rings? Rail cards is something else to look out for. Again, if there's no previous need for a rail card, why is it necessary? Where are they going? Who has bought them this? And again, these are often provided by gangs to enable that easy travel for county lines. We need to be looking for physical injuries, so unexplained bruising, burns, broken bones, a reluctance to seek any medical help, minimising injuries that you might see, which might show that your teenagers are being pressured by physical force. We need to be looking out for new medical needs. Things like sexually transmitted infections, skin sores, eating disorders, and horribly excessive toilet use. So young people have to store drugs and money that they're given somewhere. And I'm sorry to say the safest place sometimes can seem like inside their own bodies. For this, they're going to need Vaseline or lube. They're going to need condoms, cling films, sandwich bags, things that you might not expect usually to find in their bedrooms or their bathrooms. Think about their general presentation. Putting drugs inside your body can be a messy business. It doesn't smell very nice. So you could be looking for a lack of or excessive personal hygiene. How's their presentation? Are they depressed? Does life for them just seem a little bit harder than usual? Are they over or under eating? Or are they using self-harm as a way of coping with things that seem out of their control? Are they using words that they wouldn't previously have used? Are they listening to new types of music? A new reliance or a greater use of drugs and alcohol? Do they have lots of new friends? Again, none of these things in isolation are a problem for young people, but they are when they're being secretive about it. So do they have new partners, often older new partners? Are they being picked up in high-spec cars and no longer socialising with their old friends? Are they going missing? Not necessarily as a missing person for a long length of time, although this can happen. Think more about them consistently being out late, ignoring your curfews, with no explanation of where they've been. Do they suddenly go out when their phone rings and won't tell you where they're going? Are they missing school or college and they're not attending their previous clubs and social events? I know some of these things are difficult to hear, and some of these warning signs are what you would expect to see. But in reality, not confronting them is going to make everybody's life much harder. Difficult mixed messages are often given by the media, and the parents' role in teenagers' lives are rarely mentioned. I'm just going to show you a 5-minute news clip which clearly demonstrates how at risk our teenagers are and the dreadful consequences that can be seen. And this clip acknowledges that we cannot rely always on professionals and care services to keep our young people safe. As parents, you've got a huge role to play in this. You can make the difference by knowing your child. And after this clip, Chloe's going to begin to talk to you about how you can keep your family safer and happier.
Well, joining me now to discuss this is Junior Smart, OBE, who is head of the SOS Gangs project at the St Giles Trust, which helps people create a better future for themselves. Junior, thank you so much for joining me. So how do these gangs recruit children? Where do they find them? And do they have a specific type of person that they will look for?
Oh, wow. So where do these groups find the children?
Yeah.
They you know, unfortunately, the way the things are right now, young people and the situations that they're involved in increasingly make them more susceptible to these groups for recruitment. And these groups recruit young people online. Practically every single social media platform I've seen has got some sort of recruitment aspect to it. You'll see adverts, big sums of money, there's cash to be made. If you look at mainstream media, trapping is quite fashionable now. Everyone's talking about bandos and shot-in and drugs and all of that sort of stuff. It's entered mainstream media, which means that for a person with reduced availability of choice, let's just say, because the need is out there, there are young people, you know, National Youth Association are talking about over 1 million families entering into poverty this year alone. What does a young person do when they've got limited availability of choice? They don't want to ask their parents for something because they know that their parents are already struggling, their parents are already working. So actually, it's far more easier to look at something like that and see the money that can be made as attractive as and unfortunately this is what we're seeing time and time again, young people getting lured into this with promises of easy money, and then next thing you know they're trapped by the group, and the key word there is exploitation. These are young people that are going to ultimately take the risks, ultimately get criminalized, and their lives are ultimately going to be impacted in a negative way.
How can parents spot if their child is perhaps being sucked into this? Because I'm sure that some of these kids will come from pretty good homes, you know, but they may be just lured into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've been working with young people involved in gangs and criminal exploitation now for close to 18 years. And the reality is as easy as it is to say, right, actually, it's the marginalised, it's the people that are in poverty, the people that are less financially affluent. Actually, we're seeing much more numbers of young people coming from dual parent households, affluent backgrounds. Literally, the drive has been partly to these groups partly by these groups, because they know that these affluent families will take care of what they call drug debts. But I thought your video was really interesting. The British Transport Police are fantastic at what they do, and they know actually that the people that they arrest are the ones that are being exploited. Now, what that video doesn't show is what happens to those young people after, because those young people and adults that were caught with drugs, that will actually create a drug debt. And it's not as simple as just by actually you've broken the law, let's criminalise law and the justice system. Actually, these gangs, these groups that have recruited these people, they will say to them, well, now actually you owe us those drugs, that money that you've lost. And the story for us has always been about what happens to those people after, because the reality is drug debts are like how everybody else thinks of debts. They won't be written off. Those young people will face violence, they'll face consequences, and they'll often have to go back to working for those people to pay that debt off. And that's the stories that nobody really talks about. So breaking that cycle is a really, really key, important factor. With regards to parents and what they can do, I would simply say to parents, listen, this is the reality. You know your children, You need to know where they are, you need to know who they're with, and you need to know what they are up to at all times. And although this is harder, we're living in a cost of living crisis. Parents are having to work longer and harder. So obviously they're thinking, well, I can't necessarily be around. The reality is we have to try and all work together. And this is about agencies linking hands, really focusing our resources. Agencies on the ground are working off reduced resources as well. And it's really about sharing information, and it's about connecting families with services that can help and support them.
And very briefly then, for those that are caught, as you said, that they end up with a drug debt ultimately, are the police working to help those young people to get out of this debt? Because ultimately they'll catch them. They are just the mules, obviously, where it's coming from is somewhere else. Are they doing anything to support the young people that they catch?
This is a real challenge, I think, for law enforcement individuals. They've got the best intents. I've worked with law enforcement individuals. We've got some fantastic partners out there that do some terrific work. But the reality is, we don't know how many county lines are in operation. They can only give us rough estimates. We don't know how many young people are involved. And the reality is at that point of arrest, that point of stop and search, that none of that person's background will be taken into account. That's just the reality of the way it is. So the best thing that we can actually do for young people, the best way we can serve young people, is actually by educating them and supporting them and training agencies in this field to know what to look for, and also how to really get the most out of their engagement, get the most out of the organisations they're sitting around the table. There's no quick wins and there's no easy ways out, unfortunately, because by the time a young person is transporting drugs, they're already in a point where they can be criminalised on the spot. We can't just expect somebody to turn to the police and say, actually, I need your help, because if they then, that's the way the grooming and exploitation works. By doing so, they'd criminalise themselves, they're putting themselves at more risk, and they put themselves, actually, I'd say, at physical harm by the gangs. So it's actually about really kind of getting in before they get involved and showing them like these are the steps out.
Educate them. I'll just say that shot looks like you were actually in my house, because I have the same background as you when I'm doing my Zoom calls. Thank you very much, Junior. Lovely to talk to you. That's Junior Smart, OBE. He's head of SOS Gangs Project in St Giles's Trust. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we've started to hear about some of the challenges that our young people or their peers could face. So what do we do now? How do we actually keep them safe? Well, talking about safety is, as we all know, very important, but also can be quite complex. Where do we start? Well, firstly, safety planning is absolutely an ongoing conversation. We know that risks to our young people are ever changing, and that could be as they grow older, make new friends and try new things. So we need to try and normalise those discussions around safety and keep the discussions around safety planning ongoing, not just a one-off. I think it's important to recognise here that most of the things that we talk about tonight you probably already do, but there might be a few things you haven't thought about before, potentially just because you haven't needed to. So why do we need a safety plan? So as we've discussed so far tonight, we all face risks daily, and those risks to our young people are often exaggerated by peer pressure. We also need a safety plan because unfortunately we all know that the world just isn't as safe as we might like it to be. We also know that teenagers will find themselves in new situations which can sometimes impact on their safety. It's also best to be prepared. I'm sure that we're all aware of some form of fire drill or evacuation procedure, whether that's at our work, our old school fire drills, or that safety talk given on an aeroplane. Now, I'm really hopeful that none of us have ever had to use this or ever will have to use this, but the point is it's there if we need it, and planning in advance what to do in a tricky situation can reduce anxieties if that situation arises in the future. This is exactly the same as safety planning with our young people. And finally, safety planning might not only be beneficial to your child, but also their friends or other peers that are present. So now let's talk basics. So we all know that simply telling a teenager not to do something won't stop them. I'm sure that we all wish that it would. It would make everyone's lives a whole lot easier. But unfortunately, we know that that just wouldn't work. So instead, let's help them to feel as safe as possible in whatever situation they find themselves in. So I want you to think about a time that your child first said something that shocked you. It might be when they were 7 years old and asked you whether you've ever had sex because their friends, in the playground said that sex. It might be when they told you that they know what weed is. Or it might be when they've said their first swear word at the age of 3 after overhearing a sibling. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about that. Think about a time that your child first said something that shocked you. Okay, now I want you to take yourself back to their age now. Think of some of the stuff that you knew when you were their age, or maybe some of the stuff that you were doing, or some of the stuff that your friends were doing. Take yourself back to their age. Think about what you were up to when you were the same age that they are now. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that children and young people know things. They speak to their peers every single day who know other things. They see stuff online and they learn more things. They know more things than we ever expect them to know, so we need to talk to them about it. And we all know that simply pretending that something doesn't exist or isn't happening often will do more harm than good. So let's start with the basics. Do make sure that when your young person leaves the house, they have their mobile phone on them, and more importantly, that it is charged. We know that the one time they need their phone is bound to be the time that it's dead, so portable chargers are also really handy here. They can be bought from supermarkets, Amazon, Boots, and they're around kind of £10 to £20. They're very small and quite discreet, easy to pop into a pocket or a bag. And think about routines in your home for charging phones. Could they keep a spare charger in their bag so that it can be charged at a friend's house or in the car, for example? Have conversations around how important this is and your expectations of them only going out if their phone is with them and if it is fully charged. It's also so important that we have a rough idea of our young person's whereabouts, where they're planning on going and who they will be with. It's also good to get a rough idea on when they are kind of planning on returning or when you want them to be home by. They might not be honest with you. I'm sure that we can all remember a time that we've lied to our parents as teenagers, but it really is worth that ask. It also creates an open environment of us being curious as parents and encouraging those discussions around staying safe. We might all have different opinions on location trackers and Snapchat maps, for example, but when young people first have access to their phones, these are conversations to have. Is having their location on a deal breaker, for example? And if older teens are reluctant to give up this privacy and share their location, make sure you have the details of a friend who would have them on Snapchat maps, or something similar. Make sure that you do encourage them to leave any situation if they feel unsafe, and then, more importantly, having a plan on what to do next. So we live in Devon. We know that our young people tend to hang out or have parties in fields. So what can they do if they want to leave but have nowhere to go other than the next field or the next field or the field after that? This is where a secret emergency phrase between the both of you can be really helpful. This phrase can be used if your young person can't talk in front of others and need you to come and get them or need your help. So think about those everyday phrases like, when you're walking the dog, how's Auntie Susie? Are we still going to meet Grandpa tomorrow? You both know that this really means, please come and get me, or I need your help, but absolutely none of their friends or peers need to know that this is what it really means. Encourage that help seeking and that atmosphere that it's absolutely okay to ask for help and it's always best to be safe. So if they couldn't get hold of you, who could they call? Could they call another family member? Could they call another parent? Could they call an older sibling, for example? And then reminding them to call 999 in an emergency. But what really is an emergency? Well, a nice, clear way to explain this to your young person is that an emergency is when someone has been harmed or there is risk that someone will be harmed. It's also important to remind your young people that the police are the good guys and they are there to keep us safe. So using positive language at home to discuss the police will influence how our young people see them and the likelihood that they will call them when help is needed. So now let's think about transport. So I've said this before, but we are in Devon, and despite being on those great rail links, as Emma previously discussed, we all know that Devon transport is not overly accessible in the night time, and mostly we live in areas without Uber. But planning transport is incredibly important for our young people's safety, and that's for several reasons. So think about encouraging that conversation in advance. So how will they get home from their friend's house? How will they get home from a party? You will find that once they reach their kind of older teenage years, or they have their friends or even themselves start driving, then sometimes this does get a little bit easier. They might want to drive, and so often there'll be a nominated driver in their group, or someone will be offering lifts on social media. Easier in some ways, but harder in others. Do have conversations early about who they accept those lifts from, and also about the dangers and legal issues around drink driving. Opportunity here for role modelling too. Let them hear those conversations about normalising someone to drive and not have a drink. However, we do know that sometimes those best laid plans don't always go how we expect, so think about backup plans. Think about them having some spare cash, maybe a tenner in the back of their wallet or in the back of their phone case, which could come in very handy when they have no other transport options other than that bus or taxi. However, for some of our young people, walking home will feel like the only or the best options for them. So again, safety plan around this. We all know that there's safety in numbers, so help them to recognise the importance of walking home in a group of peers or at least another friend, and encourage this always. So now let's talk about drugs and alcohol, just in relation to their physical safety. So coming back to that idea that I discussed, that we can't simply tell young people not to do it. What can we do to make sure our young people are safe in the scary world of drugs and alcohol? We know that peer pressure to experiment with drugs and alcohol is incredibly common in young people. Young people also may be experiencing pressure to deal drugs or pressure to engage in unwanted sexual activities for drugs or alcohol. So speak to them about drugs and alcohol. What have they learned in school? Do any of their friends use drugs? If so, what are they? What do they do? How do they make their friends feel? Show that curiosity to engage and encourage that open conversation. Rather than telling them simply not to take drugs or alcohol, help them to make that safe choice by speaking to them about the risks. So thinking about health risks, thinking about addiction, thinking about financial risk. Drugs really do have so many slang names and different risks depending on the drug and which drugs they're potentially used alongside. So www.talktofrank.com is a really good place to start. They have a section on their website called Drugs A to Z, which gives the names of the drugs, the slang names, risks, how it feels, how it's taken, etc., etc. Make a safety plan together as well for what happens if something goes wrong when drugs or alcohol are involved. For example, if they're at a party or maybe a festival and another teenager passes out, remind them of how important it is that they call for help, and most importantly, that they will not be in trouble for calling an ambulance if it is needed. Sadly, we know that a lot of deaths linked to drugs, especially, could have been prevented if help was called upon sooner, which often teenagers can be quite scared to do because of those potential repercussions. And speak to them about other ways that they could stay safe, such as calling you for help should they need you, or maybe even using that secret code phrase like I discussed a bit earlier. Speak to them about who will be at the party, whether those people are safe, and encouraging them to spend time with their safe and supportive friends. Then we have role modelling. So really role model how you stay safe yourself. You might be going on a night out or going around a friend's house soon for a few drinks. Let your young person see you planning on how you're getting home. Let them see you booking that taxi, talking to your partner about picking you up. Role model how important safety is, especially on nights out or at parties when our inhibitions might be that slightly lowered. And if you do find drugs in your young person's room, talk to them about it. They could be involved in dealing drugs and might be extremely scared and quite unsure on where to turn. Alternatively, if they are using these drugs recreationally, this would be a good time to remind them of those risks and have that open conversation. We don't want to go too much further into all of the risks associated with drug and alcohol misuse tonight, but I do want to touch very briefly on vaping. So vaping has really quickly become the cool new thing. Not only this, but companies are making a lot of money off of teenagers buying them. So the vape companies really are getting much more clever in order to get even more rich. Now, at most major UK festivals, there will be several vape tents, all competing for each other's money. So one stand will give people the opportunity to play a fun game, which could win them a free vape. The next stand will have a fun photo backdrop, and if a photo is taken in front of that backdrop, a free vape is given. The stand after that will give a free vape if you sign up to their newsletter. Now, there are restrictions on the sale of vapes, and these companies should be asking for ID at these festival stands. However, the point really is that watching something being given out willy-nilly at events by the companies that make them and all your friends around you vaping, it's really going to give off the message to our children that vaping is absolutely okay. Vapes can also be easily bought online, and there have been several reports of teenagers accessing large quantities and then selling them at school for a higher price. Vapes are also attractive because they don't smell. We all know that awful smell of stale cigarette smoke on clothes. Vapes don't smell like that. They smell like watermelon, they smell like peach or lemons and lime. The smell really is likely to go unnoticed, so if a young person wants to vape, it won't be hard for them to access it or get away with it. We think that vaping is a new trend, and it's likely that it will die down in the teenage population in time. But it is important that we address it, as we don't fully understand those risks associated. Vapes do contain nicotine. Does your child know that? Does your child understand that nicotine can be detrimental to their health and that it is extremely addictive? As soon as you can, do try and have these discussions with them, because once they enter high school, they're very likely to start seeing a lot of young people using them, and it will very quickly become the norm to them. We really want to try and reverse that. We don't want young people vaping to become the norm. We will be talking more about this in following weeks and how to actually open up these conversations, but an easy place to start is social media. Is there a TikTok video? Maybe there's a photo on Facebook of someone a bit worse for wear. Is there graphic pictures of someone's lung collapse after vaping? Show your young person that and gather their thoughts on it. Show them the photo or the video. What do they think about it? Do they know someone that's got that drunk before? Maybe they have themselves. How might that person be feeling? How could that person keep themselves safe? Social media is a really good and a really neutral way to open up these discussions. Now, I don't think that we can really talk about physical safety without talking about emotional safety. So I am going to touch on it very quickly now, but we will be coming back to it more next week. So again, encouraging open conversations with your young person about emotional well-being and mental health is very important. Not only to have these discussions, but also to continue to create that open and that honest environment within your home so that your young person feels that they can talk to you and that they can talk to you about their worries. Encouraging them to do things that they love and things that make them feel good. Thinking about spending time and talking to safe and supportive people is very important for their emotional safety. Try and make self-care the norm. So what does that look like for your young person? Is that a bubble bath? Is it a nice walk? Is it phone calls to a friend? Is it a favourite movie? Whatever it is, young people's life comes with stress and pressure, and self-care can really help our young people to feel better and to feel calmer, especially when they have a lot going on. So similarly to what we've talked about with physical safety, who can they turn to when they're feeling low? Make sure that they know who that person is, or maybe who that group of people may be. Could they call you, for example? Could they call a sibling? Could they call a trusted friend? And finally, that same message throughout to always call 999 in an emergency. So, still sticking with safety, I'm now going to introduce you to Liam. So Liam is 15 years old and he's in year 10 at a local school in Devon. Most weekends, Liam goes out with his mates, Ben, Kyle, and Tyler. Sometimes they'll hang out at a local park. Sometimes someone is hosting a house party and they'll all go along to that. And occasionally there's a field party that they'll go to. So when they do go to a party, either Ben's older brother or Kyle's cousin will get them some alcohol to share. Usually this will be a bottle of vodka or maybe a box of beer. So now I'm going to introduce you to Lucy. Lucy is also 15 years old and she is the girlfriend of Tyler. Last year, Lucy hosted a house party when her parents went to visit her grandparents up country, leaving Lucy and her sister Elsie, aged 17, home alone. About 20 people came along to the party. So Liam, he assumed that this party would be like any other party. Ben's older brother or Kyle's cousin would get them some alcohol to share as usual, and they'd all get drunk and they'd probably crash at Lucy's house. But this time it was different. This time Tyler brought along some white powder in a small plastic bag. Tyler said that it would be fun and said that you rub it into your gums. Liam felt really unsure and had never taken drugs before. He didn't know what the powder was and felt stupid to ask. Ben and Kyle both rubbed some of the powder into their gums. Liam told them that he just wasn't sure and would rather stick to vodka tonight. Lucy's sister Elsie called him a pussy and said that he was boring. Kyle replied with, "Wow, you've been had off by Lucy's sister, mate," and then said, "Come on, mate, don't be a bore." Now, let's all just put ourselves in Liam's shoes. What might he be thinking and how might he be feeling? So all of these arrows appearing on your screen now show the people that are currently putting pressure on Liam. So thinking about that, we know that Liam might feel scared, he might feel embarrassed, he might feel lonely, he might be thinking that it's just a lot easier to take whatever drug it is. The peer pressure here really is immense. So Liam's feeling really quite torn on what to do. If he calls his mum to come and get him, he'll be made fun of by his friends, and he worries that his mum will be mad if he tells her that he's been around drugs and won't let him see Ben, Kyle, and Tyler again. He also still doesn't really know what that white powder is or what it will do to him or how it will make him feel. What we do know, what happened that night, is that Liam did end up dabbing his finger into the white powder and rubbing it into his gums. Liam instantly felt different. He had a sudden rush of energy and everything felt louder, more intense, and he felt more confident. However, after a while, Liam did start to feel quite confused and his jaw started tensing and he was feeling really quite hot. So at this stage, Liam really didn't know what to do. Liam felt that he had absolutely nowhere to turn. He felt that he couldn't call his mum or another family member, and he also didn't want to tell his friends about how he felt. So Liam took himself off to the bathroom for some space. On the way to the bathroom, he comes across Elsie's boyfriend. Elsie's boyfriend's called Sam. He's 19 and apparently he sells drugs. Liam can't really remember what happened next, but knows that he ended up pinned up against the wall by Sam, who said, you ever tell anyone, that Tyler got that MD from me and you're dead. We can tell you that thankfully Liam did make it home safe that night. Liam later found out that what he had taken was MDMA, which is a form of ecstasy. The following day, Liam felt anxious about what had happened the night before, and his mum could really tell that something was up. Liam ended up telling his mum that there were drugs at the party, but never admitted that he took them himself. Liam was surprised that his mum was very supportive and told him that he should have just called her. Liam's mum told him that she would have come and got him and that he could have made an excuse as to why he had to leave. But hopefully, this story gives us a bit of an insight into how useful safety planning really can be. Liam, of course, didn't know that Tyler would bring drugs along to the party that night. He also didn't know that his friends would pressure him. He didn't know that Sam would pin him up against the wall. But most importantly here, he didn't know that his mum would be supportive. He didn't know that they could have made a code word up before he went and that he could have just called her and asked for her help. So we just want to touch on the absolute basics on safety planning around being online. So learning how social media works and engaging with it in a positive way is a really great way to show your young person what is and what isn't okay to do online. Technology really does move so fast, and what we discuss tonight may well be outdated by tomorrow. So the links on your screen now are really the best ones to look at if you have any questions. These are updated regularly and have the most up-to-date information. We've spoken about role modelling a lot, but there's a reason for that. Young people learn how to behave by watching how you behave. So keep on top of your own privacy settings, keep those up to date, and show your young person how to stay on top of theirs. You could even ask them to check out your privacy settings. Young people are often very tech savvy, and helping you with this will role model to them the importance of privacy and give them some ownership that they've taught you something, even if you knew it already. Role model by thinking before you post and show them that you really are thinking about that. So for example, you could say something like, I quite like this photo of me, but you can clearly see our house in the background, so that wouldn't really be a great one to post online. Let's also all try and ask ourselves if our comment is constructive before we post it. Let's try and not hide behind our profile pictures. Let's help our young people to realise that social media absolutely is not anonymous. So explain to your young person that their online reputation will stay with them for a very long time. So if you wouldn't say something to someone's face, don't say it to them online. Maybe think about giving yourself a rule around who you connect with on social media and who you don't. For example, if you would stop and say hi to them on the street, you'll add them as a Facebook friend. This helps to demonstrate those boundaries in the online world to our young people. Maybe try and find some topics your family are interested in and talk about it. Take that conversation online by commenting on a group or a page about the topic and show your young person how to connect with others safely and respectfully on issues that they care about, and demonstrate those respectful conversations online. Show your young people that some people may have different opinions to you, but treat people with the same respect that you would give them face to face and report any troll-like or bullying behaviour instead of engaging with it. Being friends with your young person on social media can, of course, be a very positive thing, but there are some guidelines to try and follow. So try and remember this is a personal social space. So just like when they hang out with their friends in their room, do try and give them space and privacy by not liking or commenting on everything that they post online. This way, they're much more likely to keep you as a friend and they're less likely to feel embarrassed or smothered. Talk about their online behaviour. So if something happens on your young person's social media page and you really feel like you need to step in, try and do it in person rather than online. Commenting on social media about personal issues won't encourage trust and respect in your relationship with your young person. So instead, talk in person about what happened online and talk about how they could react or respond in a more positive way or what they could do differently next time. Your young person might not be showing you the whole picture, and that's absolutely okay. Young people are very savvy with technology and they might have worked out how to block you from seeing some post. It is important that you respect their privacy and have a chat with them if you feel that they're not being open or transparent enough. It can be useful to try and see things from your young person's perspective. Like it or not, we know that mobile technology has become a big part of many young people's daily lives. Instead of going in hard and imposing a whole lot of rules on phone use from the outset, it can be much better to try and open that dialogue. So talk to them about what they're using their phone for and let them know any worries that you might have. You may, of course, encounter a little resistance, but speaking openly and honestly is much more likely to allow you to have a proper conversation instead of that shouting match. Curiosity really is so important. So let's all try and think about how we phrase questions or comments. For example, think about how differently your teenager may react if you say something like, that sounds like a funny video, what is it? Rather than always on your phone listening to such loud videos too. They're much more likely to engage in that conversation with us if we're gentle and if we're inquisitive. And if you do feel like their phone use is getting seriously out of hand and that it is causing real problems, you may want to talk to them about some reasonable compromises when it comes to how much time they spend on it. So, for example, you might agree with them that they can go on it in their own time, but when it comes to spending quality time together as a family, say during meal times, it's rude to start texting other people. Establishing a set of rules in your own home will help create a sense of consistency and reinforce a healthy understanding of boundaries. Try making a safety plan with your young person about social media. So this doesn't necessarily need to be wrote down, it could just be verbal. You could start exploring with them what social media sites they use and what's good about them, and then go on to explore what they could do if they didn't feel safe on social media. And sometimes, of course, we all need a break from social media. So explore with your young person what they could do when they have some time away from scrolling through Instagram. Could they have a relaxing bubble bath? Could they watch a movie? Could they read a book? Could you go out for a family walk or even arrange a family games night once a month with that rule being of no phones allowed? Emma.
Thank you, Chloe. We could easily dedicate a whole session to online safety, and Chloe's just covered the basics. And like she said, those two sites that are on the screen now really are the best two to keep up to date with everything. We're going to move on a little bit now to grooming and exploitation. And we know that grooming is something that happens when someone takes advantage of another person by persuading them to think and do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. So there's a tough subject coming up now, but it is an important one. We're going to talk about pornography and our young people for a minute. So if you do want to mute us, this subject takes about just under 10 minutes if you want to make a cup of tea, and then come back if you think this will be hard for you. So research shows us that anyone on the internet can be about 6 clicks or less away from seeing inappropriate or harmful content online. Try it out. Type in something totally appropriate that your young person might search for. Just follow the links that it sends you and see where it takes you. Research commissioned by a safety group showed the strength of these algorithms and how they're used by social media companies based on a user's activity. So, for example, if you think about your Facebook or your Twitter and the kind of adverts that come up, they are targeted to you based on your previous searches. So whilst a teenage boy just Googling random stuff may be targeted with some age-appropriate material, such as college courses or sportswear, he's also likely to be targeted with highly sexual content just because he's a teenage boy. So your 14-year-old clicking on a recipe labelled healthy eating, then following the next click, might then find diet tips. Then the next link will lead them to eating disorder sites, which could totally distort their image of a healthy body and not at all what they were originally looking for. We know now that the average age for a child's first exposure to online pornography is 11, with the exposure for younger children now being as early as 5. And I know you don't want to hear this, but young people under the age of 15 account for nearly 22% of regular Pornhub users. So porn is like any other addictive drug, and it affects our young people's brains in the same way that drugs do. Deep inside our brains, there's something called a reward center. You've got one, so have your children, so actually is your dog. And the reward center's job is to release pleasure chemicals into your brain whenever you do something that feels good for you, like eating tasty food, doing a workout, or enjoying a kiss with someone. The high that you get from that chemical rush makes you want to repeat that behavior again and again. And thanks to your reward center, your brain is hardwired to motivate you to do things that will improve your health, ultimately your chance of survival. It's a great system, normally. The problem is that your brain can be tricked. When addictive substances are used, they give your brain a false signal. And since your brain can't tell the difference between, say, drugs and a real healthy reward, it goes ahead anyway and activates this reward center. So an important chemical called dopamine is released, which makes your brain start developing a craving for that reward. Fake or otherwise, your brain can't tell. As long as there's lots of this dopamine floating around, these cravings are going to keep getting stronger, and we're going to feel super motivated to keep pursuing more and more of that drug. Because essentially addictive drugs hijack our brain, turning it around and forcing it in a direction that was never meant to go. And want to guess what else makes us do that? Porn. Researchers have found that internet porn and addictive substances like tobacco have very similar effects on our brain. So what that means, and what most of us realise, is the more drugs we take, the more we need. And that's why addiction is so hard. And studies have shown that porn stimulates the same areas of the brain as these addictive drugs, making the brain release the same chemicals. So porn triggers pathways in the brain that cause cravings, leading users to go back for more and more extreme hits to get their high. Just like when we take drugs, we build up a tolerance, so we need newer and more hardcore porn for the same effects. And this is exactly what today's internet porn sites provide. An endless stream of fresh images delivered at high speed in vivid colour 24/7. Before porn users even start to get bored, they can give themselves another dopamine boost just by clicking on something different, something more stimulating, and something more hardcore than before. Porn consumption really does follow a very predictable pattern that's very similar to drug use. We obviously try and protect our children all the time from drugs. You can't buy cigarettes, alcohol, and in many shops you can't even buy paracetamol without having to prove your age. But currently, although this is going to change, we hope, only about 3% of pornographic websites require you to prove your age before viewing, and you can still lie. And a huge 45% of the sites do not even include any adult content warnings, which makes it very, very easy for your child to stumble into a pornography site by accident. In 2018, the Internet Watch Foundation removed 105,000 web pages showing sexual abuse of children. The online porn industry is suggested to be worth over £97 billion. So protecting your children is not top of this industry's priorities. Of course, your children may also deliberately search pornographic content, and they might do this for various reasons. And remember that it's perfectly normal for them at this age to be curious about bodies, about sex, and about relationships. And sometimes they might just be looking online to find answers to questions that they're too embarrassed to ask. But exposure to pornographic content harms children. Exposure to pornography at a young age leads to poor mental health, sexism, objectification, sexual violence, and many other negative outcomes. And among other risks, when children view pornography that portrays abusive and misogynistic acts, they come to view such behaviour as normal and acceptable. If your child's first kind of understanding about sex and relationships is through a porn site, they're going to come to view behaviour like that as normal and acceptable. It's really hard, isn't it, to think about how something that your child might see at age 11 may then have terrible consequences in his or her relationship 20 years from now. But that really is the reality when we're talking about pornography. And pornography has really changed in recent years. When most of us were children, the only way to access pornography was by embarrassing yourself and buying a top shelf magazine or a DVD, or embarrassing yourself even more and having to go into a sex shop. But our children don't need to do this. So in a way, we were better protected than they are now. With the best will in the world, it is really hard to protect your children from online dangers. Yes, we can look at parental controls, we can look at blocking of websites, etc. But if they really want to find something, they will. There are hundreds of sites that we can direct you to around online safety. You can just Google it, put it into YouTube, but their friend's phone or laptop may not have the same safety features, and there's not a lot you can do about stopping your children from accessing things when they're out of your reach. It's all really scary. Some of these stats are horrible on your screen now, and you might feel a bit powerless about what you can do. But we're going to go straight back to our basics. However awkward and embarrassing this might be, they need to talk to you and you need to talk to them. Because if you don't fill in the gaps, then somebody else will. I've just told you that the average age of a child viewing their first online pornography is now 11. So you can never have these conversations too early. Don't let the awkwardness build until it becomes a taboo subject. If you've managed to build that safe and open environment, then your young person might come to you with questions way earlier than you expect them to. Try not to tell them off if you do find that they've accessed porn, and try not to instantly take away their device as punishment. Try to be casual, give age-appropriate answers, but it is still okay to say that some things are only for adults and it's not okay for them to be looking at it. Also remember that what they have seen might have scared them. There's some dreadful stuff online. So you will need to be reassuring about the confusing emotions that your young person might feel after seeing some explicit content. Remind them it's okay to be curious. This really is a normal part of growing up, but also be prepared to challenge views that might arise from watching adult content. Reinforce the message that sex and bodies that they've seen in porn are not realistic. Explain that porn can make things like non-consensual sex appear normal and okay, but it's really not. We wouldn't want our children's first impression of sex to be as distorted as we know porn can be. And there's also a lot of AI porn around now, that deep fake porn. So what they're watching might not even be slightly real. It's really hard for your young people to work out what is real and what is not when they're watching things online. Start these conversations as early as you can, even using the correct words for body parts to avoid any confusion. Talk about consent so that there's no blurring of lines, and encourage them to respect their own and other people's bodies. It is really embarrassing for you. It's really embarrassing for your young person, but that embarrassment is really worth getting over. And then just one last mention of something. As we've said, an important part of keeping people and your family safe is protecting them from those who might try to groom and exploit them. And again, grooming happens when someone takes advantage of another person by persuading them to think and do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. And as well as thinking about this in terms of sexual grooming, this can also include encouraging someone to develop support for extremist ideas. And these may be political, religious, or other causes. And the person being groomed may be encouraged to feel anger and intolerance towards other people, groups, or communities. And people exposed to these forms of online grooming can become what we call radicalized. So they may believe that their actions need to be taken to advance their ideas. For example, your child might be encouraged to beat somebody up at school from a different religion or political group. And in very extreme cases, they may come to support terrorist activity, something that's in the news a lot at the moment, which is why we're always telling you to, if there is something on the news, have those conversations with your children as soon as you can. Teenagers are really targeted with grooming through the internet, through social media and online gaming sites. It can literally happen to anyone's children. And the way young children and young people interact with hateful content is also changing. More and more young people appear to be taking elements of existing extreme viewpoints and merging them together to create new ideas. So we don't want to dwell on this for too long, but we do just want to share a slide with you from the Safer Devon Partnership around Prevent, and they can help you also, their website, with any further questions that you may have.
Hiya.
All right, mate. It's me. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay.
How you feeling about tomorrow?
Yeah, fine.
Come on. Remember who you are. You're not a loser anymore.
Who even are you?
You're a total loser.
Everyone doubted you. You should be so proud with how far you've come. This is your moment, mate.
This behaviour is unacceptable in class. What's going on?
We're here for you. We're your real family, yeah?
You listen to me. I can really talk to you guys.
You spend too much time on that screen.
Don't you walk away from me.
You guys have got me here. Everyone else have just let me down.
Because you're one of us. We really believe in you, mate.
Thank you.
Be strong. Remember everything we've been through and taught you. You make us proud tomorrow, right? So are you ready?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna do this.
Okay, so radicalisation can really happen over anything from a few days to several years. And the signs are similar that we gave you to any kind of online grooming. And when someone becomes radicalised, it can endanger their safety and welfare and the safety and welfare of those around them. So intervening early and doing some research, you can ensure that the person you're concerned about receives support to keep them safe, preventing them from further radicalisation. So you've stuck with us tonight. Well done. We've done some really tough subjects, haven't we? There are some signposting. There is a slide now with some signposting sites on. This is when the internet's a good place, isn't it? Just do a bit of research, have a look around at things. But these relate to the subjects that we've really spoken to tonight. Young Minds are on there. They're a great parent helpline for anyone with children under 25, and the NSPCC also a great website with lots of general safety advice for children of all ages. We want to thank you so much for coming along tonight. There is going to be a QR code up on the screen in a minute for you to give us any feedback that you might have, please. Having so many of you attending has been amazing, but please do let us know if tonight has been helpful, and we really hope that you've taken something away from tonight. We do appreciate that it's been tricky at times and we have discussed some really serious topics. As with last week, please try and talk to your family about things that we've discussed tonight. Knock on your teenager's door, pop your head in, say goodnight to them. It really can make a world of difference. Try again to give them that hug. Try and hold on for 20 seconds with their permission, because that really is scientifically proven to give yours and their well-being a boost. Explain to them why that hug is such a good idea. A little bit of advertising now. We do also run our pre-talk, Let's Talk pre-teen sessions, which are for our younger children. And if you're watching this on the recording, you might well have missed those dates, but we will send you the link so that you can watch that back on the screen. And this again is the QR code that we spoke about. We will be here again next Tuesday for our last session, and next week we will be looking at how to actually have some of those difficult conversations that we keep talking about. We're going to be looking at family strengthening, role modelling, and some more positive mental health tips, and we would love to see you all again. It's not the same Teams link as tonight, so do make sure that you sign up. The links and our toolkit that accompanies tonight's session will be sent out to you by email. That may already have happened and you might have got that email, but if it hasn't, it's on its way. Thank you so much for joining us. Do have a cup of tea, wind down a little bit before you go to bed tonight, because it has been a tough week, and we really hope to see you again next week. Take care of yourselves. Thank you and good night.